Number 9 Kelvin Road, the scene of a crime of appalling brutality. It was here that 34-year-old Mandy Power, her young daughters Katie and Emily, and elderly mother Doris Dawson were beaten to death.
The attack on Mandy shows that she was a target. The girls, I think, to use that awful expression, collateral, or killed because they would have been witnesses to something like that.
Matt's the taller guy that I saw that morning.
Were these the two men that you saw that night?
Yeah.
This is where I seen him, just here, and I seen him perfectly.
Is there anything you would like to say about the murders of Rushcore people?
I don't know nothing about the murders.
Without any doubt, the kill has purposely, intentionally gone to destroy images of the family. The images of the family in the sense of trying to set fire to Doris upstairs, burning the pictures of the two girls. They were making statements. And it's to kind of wipe out the whole family.
I know that he's not capable of doing that. I've never ever doubted it.
Just because he had a criminal past, it was an easy target.
Hello and welcome to I Could Murder a Podcast. It's that time of the year, it is that time of the series, it is the series finale. And this year's series finale is slightly different because it has been chosen by you, our lovely audience and listeners. And I'm joined by the man in stripes. It's Ben Carter.
Thank you so much. One of the kindest introductions of the series, which is fine, being the last episode. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. The audience vote, Tom and Dan. Wow. We'll talk about that. But what a case. And what a day for the finale to go out. I believe someone's just turned 40.
I know I haven't.
37.
Today is my birthday. Not today in our world, but today, as this episode goes out, it's my birthday. So I don't like making a big thing about it, but...
Oh, here he is.
I'm not going to wear these for the whole episode, don't worry. But
their prescription.
First of all, 12 episodes, 12 series, highs and lows, gains and losses. It's been amazing. What a journey. How are you boys feeling?
Yeah, if this series has absolutely, I know we say it all the time, it has absolutely flown by this series. Loads of lovely comments. We've had lots of people joining us this series, which has been absolutely fantastic. When this episode goes out, we've got two very exciting collaborations we're doing as well. We don't do too many collabs, but very excited by them. And hopefully we have more in the future for that kind of stuff. And yeah, I feel the podcast is in a very good space. What about you, Ben?
Yeah, I feel like we've sort of gone from a toddler into a middle-aged child.
I've never been in a toddler. I just want to say that from now. But Ben,
a middle-aged child.
But yeah, there was a lot to unpack there from that sentence. But I feel like we've grown up. I feel like we're not quite an established adult podcast yet, but we're getting there. We're a middle-aged child, as I said. But for those that are listening or watching us for the very first time, apologies about that sentence. But basically, we are I Could Murder a Podcast. We do 12 episodes a series, and then we go off and have a little break and do another series. But in those 12 episodes, we typically do one audience vote. Usually episode 10, episode 11, but this series, we fucking mixed it up and we allowed the audience to take our finale and run with it. And I have to say, there were probably 3 or 4 people that took this case and really wanted this case to be covered, because we had dozens of votes from people that do not follow the podcast and probably won't be listening or watching this episode. But this case also comes up every time we do an audience vote. There's like a dozen people chasing this case. And yes, I can understand completely the fascination behind this and the anger behind this one, the division behind this one. And producer Dan, on your birthday, Am I right in thinking you only know the very basics of this case?
Yes. As is quite frequently done, I know the headlines. I know kind of what happened, but not the details. So I'm very intrigued. This sounds like a really nasty one.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. It really is.
Hello, just a quick little message to let you know we are now on the road to 100,000 subscribers over here on YouTube. It's a big old feat, it's still a long way to go, and we can't do it without your help. We've noticed over 47% of you watching right now aren't subscribed. So if you're one of those, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It means the world to us. And I'll tell you what, if we manage to reach 100,000 subscribers, within 6 months of doing so, we promise to commit to doing a live show somewhere in the UK. So let's do it. Let's reach 100,000 subscribers. We can only do it with your help. Please hit that button now. Anyway, back to the case.
Yeah, it is an infuriating case. I can see why it's one that has lit the passion and fire in a lot of people's bellies, and they want to keep this story alive and keep it out there because of what people deem to be a completely mishandling of justice. And it's one which I think, it just baffles me how it was able to get to the stage where it is today, essentially. So yeah, it is one that I'm very excited to unpick. And I think it's good to be, spreading the word on this if people don't know about the case, and letting people learn about it. And then hopefully, the more people that do this and keep this case alive, then it spreads more light, and hopefully it could maybe one day lead to a change regarding it. But I don't want to give too much away. But yeah, this is a very interesting one. And I think the audience have done a very good job with picking the final case.
Absolutely, yeah. And in many people's eyes, this case is still technically unsolved. So we'll get into that. But as you said, very important to keep telling this story. And one that I'm very keen to hear the opinions of you guys on, you boys on, and also our lovely audience. It actually came up against John Lennon, the murder of John Lennon in the final two.
Can you imagine?
And but loads of other, whenever we do an audience vote, we always get we use it as an idea to sort of dip a toe into the water of what other cases people want to see. There's loads of other interesting ones that came close. So stay tuned for some big cases in Series 13. But should we get into the finale?
Yes, please.
So Series 12, Episode 12, The Clydach Murders, also referred to as the case of David Dye Morris. Murder in the Valleys, The Clydach Nightmare. The life and alleged crimes of David Morris. Who was responsible for the Clydach killings? A massacre at 9 Kelvin Road. And Clydach, the unsolved murders that haunt Wales. I'll get this early doors as well. Really love the people of Wales. I hope you're as patient and understanding as the Americans are when we mispronounce certain areas, and I really fucking hope you're as patient and as understanding as the Scottish and the Irish, who tend to be extremely unhappy. Well, the minorities tend to be extremely unhappy when we get pronunciations slightly off. So apologies.
I just want to say as well, though, but when we find a word, we do honestly go on a website.
We try
and we click the button, and it does say it for us, and then we go okay, and we do go back, and if we think that's slightly wrong, we do it again. Yeah. So I don't think we should shoulder all the blame with that, because I do think it's a snidey little website who does it wrong, and makes us do it wrong. We try.
Chronic overthinkers here as well. We don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but for the Welsh folks, there's not going to be a lot. Clydach is. It looks like on paper Clydach. That's
how I said it in my brain earlier.
Yes, but apparently Clydach, kind of like Quidditch, but not with the sh on the end. So like
not
Clydach,
like it, really.
Kind of like it.
I'm going to search how to say it now.
Fair play.
Clydach, yeah, you're right. Clydach.
But there's like a ch on the end, I feel.
Oh, is there?
Clydach.
Yeah, that's not good to listen to. Let's not do that.
Probably pissed the Welsh off now.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Oh. Anyway, for the final time this series, producer Dan, would you please set the scene?
The nightmare began as the clock approached midnight on Saturday, June 26th, 1999. Whilst much of the neighbourhood was sound asleep in the small scenic village of Clydach, South Wales, the gruesome actions within one household would leave a community both mortified and divided for many years to come. Behind the closed doors of an ordinary semi-detached home at number 9 Kelvin Road, a horror unfolded that would shake the quiet community and much of the entire Welsh nation to its core. 4 members of the same family were brutally murdered. Mandy Power, a 34-year-old single mother, her 2 young daughters, 10-year-old Katie and 8-year-old Emily, as well as Mandy's 80-year-old mother, Doris Dawson. 3 generations were wiped out in mere moments. The women and young girls were viciously beaten to death with what investigators believe to be a heavy metal pole. Doris was presumed to have been murdered as she slept, whilst the intruder subsequently hid in wait for Mandy and her young daughters. The killer didn't just stop there. The house was then set ablaze in 4 separate areas, as if to try and erase every trace of the unspeakable violence that had just occurred within the 4 walls. There were no signs of forced entry, no immediate suspects, and no clear motive for these appalling crimes. Just carnage, confusion, and the chilling sense that someone capable of extreme brutality had simply walked away into the night, completely unseen. As panic spread and the news media began to swarm the quiet village, police launched one of the largest murder investigations Wales had ever seen. Over a year later, their attention abruptly turned to David Di Morris, a local builder and former nightclub bouncer with a highly volatile past. He was arrested and later convicted twice for the 4 murders, with the prosecution arguing he murdered Mandy Power in a fit of jealous rage after a supposed sexual rejection. The case, at first glance, seemed closed, and justice, it appeared, had been delivered. However, in the years that followed, cracks soon began to show. Morris maintained his innocence until the day he died in prison in 2021, and in the years following his convictions, growing numbers of legal experts, journalists, and members of the public began to question whether the police had truly found their man. Some of the evidence was circumstantial. Key forensic links were missing. Other suspects, ones with far more disturbing connections to the victims, were quietly dismissed. Serious concerns were raised about how the investigation was handled, with allegations of corruption, tunnel vision, and even potential cover-ups. And so today, 26 years later, the Clydach murders remain steeped in doubt, unanswered questions, and deeply disturbing possibilities. What if David Morris was innocent? What if the real killer, the person who brutally beat a grandmother, mother, and 2 young children to death, was never caught? These disturbing possibilities linger like a haunting shadow over the village of Clydach, that the true murderer is still out there and still walking free.
How could one person carry out such a frenzied and prolonged attack on 4 victims, including 2 young children, without being seen or heard in such a small, close-knit community? Why do so many people, including legal experts, journalists, and members of the public, remain deeply uncomfortable with the official version of events and the subsequent convictions of David Morris decades after the fact? What really happened inside that house on Kelvin Road during those final, terrifying hours of Mandy Power and her family's lives? And when, if ever, will the full truth of what happened in Clydach on that fateful night finally come to light, offering closure to a case that has truly left more questions than answers?
So we're going to format this week's case slightly differently this week and jump straight into the timeline of events, and then we're going to explore the background of David Morris as well as the Power family, before also exploring the numerous different potential suspects, theories, and the reason why so many people believe that this case was completely mishandled from the very start.
I am intrigued. I am very intrigued.
A lot of big old question marks in this case, Daniel. And I hope with the extra year that you've got a bit wiser.
Hopefully.
As well.
Hopefully it's not the other way.
Yeah, doddery. Oh, it's fine. Leave it as it is. But yes, anyway, let's get into the case. Late night, June 26th, 1999. The village of Clydach, Wales. During the course of the evening, 38-year-old David Di Morris, who we will refer to as Morris throughout the episode, had been drinking at the pub called the New Inn, which was located on Lone Road, sitting on the outskirts of the village of Clydach. It was a Saturday, the pub was fairly busy, and most of the drinkers present appeared to be in good spirits, enjoying their weekends. Morris was out with his girlfriend, Mandy Jewell, and he consumed 8 pints of lager over the next few hours, as well as the illegal stimulant drug, amphetamine. Many reports indicate that Morris was considered an unpopular and unsavoury character in the local area at the time. A father of 3 children, including 2 girls, Janine and Laura, Morris lived in the neighbouring village of Craig Kevin Park, where he worked as a builder's labourer, scrap metal dealer, and also previously worked as a nightclub bouncer. Over the last couple of decades, Morris had built up a lengthy criminal record, including numerous offences of robbery, vehicle theft and burglary. He also allegedly once hit a man over the head with a large piece of wood, nearly killing him in the process. There were other terrifying stories of him stealing handbags off of women, striking other men with hammers, and on one occasion, grabbing a woman by the name of Sylvia Gay by the hair and throwing her onto the bonnet of a car in front of her 2.5-year-old child. As well as this, back in 1997, Morris had allegedly broken into a flat belonging to a man by the name of Carl Wassell, where he repeatedly beat him in the head with a piece of an iron pipe. The lead prosecutor for this crime stated, "It's nothing short of a miracle that Mr. Wassell escaped with his life and was not left with permanent disabilities." Though, shockingly for this crime, Morris was later cleared on the grounds of self-defence. It is not exactly clear how or why Morris was defending himself with an iron pipe after breaking it into someone else's flat. So yeah, that paints quite a picture immediately of Morris. Lots of very kind of Cluedo-esque attacks in there as well.
Very Cluedo-esque. Or in Wales, Clydach. Sorry.
That feels offensive.
Yeah, and I'm not usually one for that. But yes, very Cluedo-esque. And yeah, as the prosecution tried to in this trial, we're obviously painting the negative elements of Morris right from the start. But we'll go into why this is relevant, and we'll go into other reasons why, all of this might be actually irrelevant.
Can I interject, actually, Ben? I don't think we're painting the negative image. I think we're just painting the full picture.
Oh, fantastic.
You need context, don't you?
You do need it, yeah.
Back to the case.
So these other offences had resulted in Morris spending 5 years in prison, and yeah, he acquired dozens of convictions during that period. It was also reported that his first wife, a woman by the name of Wendy, had divorced him because he had used violence against her on multiple occasions. But this would later be disputed. Morris was considered by some in the village as a, quote, violent drug-using alcoholic who was also a known womanizer in the area. Many who were present in the pub that night didn't even react when Morris started getting into a loud verbal argument with his girlfriend, Mandy Jewell. This was something that was apparently quite common. The pair shouted at one another before Mandy left the pub at around 9 p.m. Morris would remain in the pub and continue drinking by himself for the next hour and a half. So yeah, a couple of notes worth making here at this point is that, at least according to the future prosecution, Morris was allegedly heard during this argument repeatedly referring to a woman by the name of Mandy Power, not Mandy Jewell, they just happen to have the same first name, in a derogatory manner. And apparently the more he would speak about Mandy Power, the more infuriated about this woman he would become as he consumed more lager and as the night went on. Apparently, he was so angry when discussing Mandy Power, and again, this has been argued as well, that he was apparently clenching and shaking his fists whilst talking about her, which is a very kind of cartoonish way to express anger about someone. His girlfriend Mandy Jewell had also apparently fallen out with Mandy Power, and apparently the pair of them were once the best of friends. She was allegedly heard calling Mandy Power a slapper before leaving the pub. And she had also been heard saying negative things about Mandy Power. For the Americans, overseas listeners, a slapper, guys?
A slut.
It's as simple as that.
I haven't heard that word in decades.
It's a very EastEnders word.
Yes.
I'd probably say it's more of a Cockney kind of southern word than it is a northern word.
It sounded Scouse.
She's a right slapper.
Cockney. So prosecutor Patrick Harrington would later state,
although Morris did not like Mandy Power, he probably fancied her. In fact, he hated her, but wanted to have a sexual relationship with her. He told his friends that he had a sexual relationship with her, but they said it was unlikely. At least in the mind of David Morris, sex, himself and Mandy Power went together. He became increasingly agitated and angry. He was clenching his fists. He called her a fucking slag. Fucking evil and a fucking liar, but without even raising his voice. It was the calm before a terrible storm. Morris had drunk about 8 pints that day, and in the last pub he visited, 3 eyewitnesses said that he was wearing a gold chain outside a t-shirt. He then left at last orders with a real look of anger on his face and stomped out the pub.
So as with a great portion of this case, all of this that prosecutor just said has been argued. It's kind of agreed that 8 pints of lager around that was consumed in the pub, but all of this that he stated, the talking of Mandy Power, the anger, the stomping out the pub, all of that has been argued. But do keep in mind one thing he said, which is the reference of a gold chain that he was wearing outside his t-shirt. There'll be more on that shortly.
Yeah, and obviously we're gonna go into that a lot more later on. But I honestly couldn't tell you if, like, Ben, you both of you wear necklaces on occasion. I wouldn't be able to say, especially after being at a pub, remembering back to a night which I wouldn't have a reason to remember, and then tell you if I remember seeing the gold chain. Let alone 3 people out of least saying that. Unless you're taking pictures on the phone, but this wasn't that. This was way before that era.
You know, back in those days, some people wore really thick, and still do wear really thick silver sort of chains that are, this is a gold chain anyway, but you know, those ones that are over the, typically I'm imagining a black t-shirt with a big chain over the top of it that are really standout-ish. But this was a different vibe. And it was also held together by a little string of copper because the clasp had broken. So his was kind of distinctive, but quite a thin little necklace still. It's not, as Tom said, I don't think you'd be able to clock it as something standout.
Yeah. If a man's sitting next to me after 8 pints and taking amphetamines, I'm not going to be going, yeah, I remember his chain.
Meanwhile, several miles away, in stark contrast to what was happening over at the New Inn pub, 34-year-old Mandy Power was spending her Saturday night babysitting for a friend, and she had brought along her 2 young daughters with her, 10-year-old Katie and 8-year-old Emily. Amanda Mandy Power was a single mother who had divorced from the girl's father and moved in together with her 80-year-old mother, Doris, and this was in order to help care for her and bring her children closer to her grandmother. Obviously, she also needed somewhere to live after the divorce, so this just made a whole lot of sense. The family lived at number 9 Kelvin Road in Clydach. Mandy's sisters and brother, who she was extremely close with, also lived in the local community not too far away from her. Mandy, who was popular in the village, was described as having a fantastic personality and a love for life. Though she was recently divorced from a local baker named Michael Power, she had kept her married name, and she had briefly held a relationship with a man who lived in the house opposite her mother, and this was a man by the name of Mr. Rob Verkowski. There's a huge amount of speculation surrounding whether or not she and David Morris ever held any kind of relationship, and again, we're going to get into that shortly, but there's a lot of focus in this case on Mandy Power herself, who she had held relationships with, who she'd held secret relationships with, and why this was relevant to ultimately what is going to happen in the next few hours. And yeah, once again, there'll be a whole lot more on this shortly.
At around 11 p.m, Mandy's friends returned home and the trio caught up whilst Mandy waited for a taxi to arrive. It's not clear exactly how far from home this babysitting job was, but it was far enough and late enough at night to warrant Mandy and her little girls getting a taxi back home. All the while, Doris, Mandy's mother and the children's grandmother, was fast asleep at the family home, and had been so for many hours. Doris had numerous health issues, and as a result, her daughter and grandchildren helped to look after her. She wasn't fully mobile and walked with the aid of a Zimmer frame. Doris was described by the family as well-respected, kind, and a strong character. None of them had any idea at this point of the evil that was slowly heading towards, or was even already waiting in, number 9 Kelvin Road. 11:30 p.m. Back at the New Inn pub, an hour and a half after he and his girlfriend loudly argued and caused a scene in front of other drinkers, some of whom seemed stunned, whilst others didn't remember this happening at all, David Morris left the pub by himself in a fairly drunk and hazy state after last orders were called. The overriding theory from the prosecution is that Morris left the pub in a fit of rage after the argument with his girlfriend, as well as the talk about Mandy Power, and, filled with anger, alcohol and amphetamine, he allegedly decided to head to number 9 Kelvin Road. From the New Inn pub, it's about a half-a-mile walk to Kelvin Road, which would typically take around 15 minutes by walking alongside a main road called Lone Road. In taking this route, Morris would have been seen by motorists and possibly other members of the public nearby, as it was a fairly busy area, even late at night. he was not seen by anyone. However, in acknowledging this possibility, prosecutors would later also allege that Morris, even in his alcohol and drug-fueled state, knew a second route to Kelvin Road, which went alongside a small woodland and the riverbanks of the lower Clydach River, where nobody would have witnessed him until he arrived on Kelvin Road. This journey would be considered terrifying at night by some, as it was barely even a public footpath, was heavily wooded, and was very close to the river's edge. This journey, however, would have taken closer to 20, maybe even 25 minutes to complete, which is very relevant because at 11:48 p.m, approximately 18 minutes after Morris had left the pub, Mandy Power and her daughters were dropped off at 9 Kelvin Road by a taxi, who then drove off into the night. Aside from the person responsible for their deaths, this taxi driver would become the last person to see Mandy and her 2 young daughters alive before they were brutally murdered within the next few hours. According to an article by Wales Online, this taxi driver claimed he remembered seeing 2 men walking on Kelvin Road in Clydach after dropping off a fare in the early hours. He said he believed he later saw pictures of the 2 men in the newspaper, but that he could not be 100% sure it was them. The article stated that the taxi driver claimed he told police about this, but that he was not interviewed and did not give evidence in either of the subsequent trials. Either way, Mandy and her 2 young daughters enter the front door of their home for the final time.
If David Morris was responsible for what happened, then it would have allowed him a 3-minute window to complete the following disturbing tasks. Number 1, he would have needed to have broken into or entered the property without causing any kind of noise or signs of forced entry. Number 2, he would have needed to have literally stumbled upon the eventual murder weapon. It's widely believed that the killer, whoever they were, hadn't planned the murders meticulously or well in advance, because the murder weapon, a 1-meter long heavy metal pole, was already kept at the property beforehand and was not specifically brought to the scene. Number 3, he would have needed to have bludgeoned 80-year-old Doris Dawson to death with the metal pole. It's widely believed that Doris was murdered first, as the injuries on each of the 4 victims were consistent with repeated metal pole strikes, but Doris's blood was not found on the pole, whereas the blood of the other 3 victims was. This suggests that Doris's blood was removed during the other 3 frenzied attacks. And finally, number 4. In murdering Doris Dawson, a hanging light in the bedroom ceiling was shattered, causing a fuse to blow in the house and most of the lights and electrics to go out. The killer would have needed to remove a television from a chair in the child's bedroom, take the chair to the bathroom, place it on the floor, and then climb on it in order to replace the fuse in the fuse box and get power back on in the house.
So that's quite a lot for a 3-minute window. I mean, number 4, you could argue that could have happened at any point.
Yeah.
But if that fits the prosecution's narrative, that's a lot. And that's if he's gone in the public route by the main road rather than the back route, which they lean to. So,
Once again, to fit the prosecution's narrative, all of this would have needed to have been done within roughly a 3-minute window. And as Ben said, this is if Morris took the Lone Road, the main road route, rather than the Riverside route. To counter this, it is possible that the killer wasn't Morris, and that they had in fact murdered Doris many hours before. There is essentially a window of time between 8 p.m. Saturday night through to 4:30 a.m. Sunday morning, during which time nobody can say for sure what happened. David Morris had an alibi from around 7 p.m. through to 11:30 p.m. And it is possible, though unlikely, that the other 3 victims were further assaulted with a pipe after Doris had been killed.
So yeah, basically we have from around 8 p.m. the Saturday night to around 4:30 a.m. the Sunday morning, we have that window where it's not completely clear. And there are very strong beliefs that David Morris was not the person that was responsible for this. There are other people that believe he was responsible for this, and actually it doesn't matter what route he took home. The process in which victim was taken first, second, third, fourth, that could be argued and disputed. It can't be proven in a concrete fashion what happened. And the difficulty with this is that in order to be able to dissect it into like microscopic detail with what is about to happen next to the crime scene itself, it makes it very, very difficult to work out exactly what happened in which time. So it doesn't necessarily mean he wouldn't have had time to do all of this. As we said, he could have, the chair, the television, moving that about could have been done last. Doris, technically, though it's argued, might not have been killed first. It still means that within the time frame that the prosecution are speculating, he still would have had to have done all this very, very quickly and very, very quietly, which when you're bludgeoning someone to death with a metal pole, I imagine is incredibly hard to do. But yeah, there's around an 8-hour gap that we still don't have total clarity on, or an 8-hour window that's a bit misty. Can't see through it. Regardless of this, at just after 1:45, 34-year-old Mandy, 10-year-old Katie, and 8-year-old Emily enter the family home, and they are never seen alive again. Each of them are brutally and systematically bludgeoned to death with a meter-long metal pole. Mandy Power's face was smashed in 10 separate places, and she sustained at least 20 separate blows to the head and body. Her youngest daughter, Emily, had her skull smashed into 20 pieces, and her older sister, Katie, had several severe and seemingly especially violent head injuries, which indicated that the pole used in the attack had been, quote, pulled through her skull fractures, with part of the 10-year-old's brain being exposed due to the ferocity of the strikes. Their grandmother also sustained several fractures to her face and skull, which were consistent with that of a metal pole. After Mandy was brutally murdered, she was aggressively sexually assaulted with a vibrator and placed into a bathtub in the bathroom, where she was apparently bathed and washed. She then had a silver wristwatch placed on her, the origin of which is not completely clear, and investigators would later state that this strange moment of respect and intimacy was in massive contrast and didn't match the violent nature and callousness of the rest of the murders, whilst others, and I probably agree with this as well, suggest that it wasn't an intimate moment, it wasn't a moment of respect, it was purely an effort by the killer to try and wash the body of any DNA evidence. But yeah, that is an absolutely appalling scene. There was also, because we'll talk about the metal pipe in a minute, but there was very limited evidence found at this terrible, terrible scene. But one thing that was found was a bloody white sock that appeared to have been used to cover a hand, as kind of used as a glove to hold the metal pole. And there was very, very limited DNA left on this, but it did have the blood of the victims on it. But yeah, just an absolutely terrifying scene there.
That is horrific.
And this is the thing, the argument will be, well, the main argument is that this happened as a result of someone, for some reason, had motive against Mandy Power, and the grandmother and the two young daughters were collateral in this attack. But for anyone to be able to do that to any human alone, but to two young, a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old girl, it's absolutely haunting.
Again, David Morris, 8 pints in on a drug-fueled binge, leaving no trace of DNA whilst doing this attack.
Yeah.
That doesn't really stack up in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we said, there is this kind of 8-hour or so window from where, obviously Mandy was out babysitting. Doris was home alone, presumably had an early night. Just because David was at the pub until 11:30 doesn't necessarily mean that there wasn't someone already in the house by that point. But yeah, we're gonna get into more of this shortly. So between the late night of June 26th and the early morning of June 27th, during the murder spree, or perhaps once Doris had been murdered and whilst the killer was waiting for Mandy and her 2 children, which is a terrifying thought, as we've mentioned, a fuse was blown in the house. And the main speculation is that as this individual was striking Doris, who laid in bed with this metal pole, they hit a ceiling light, which at that time, caused loads of other electrics and lights to go out in the house. As a result, the killer went into one of the children's bedrooms and removed a TV from a chair, placing the TV on a nearby bed. The killer is then believed to have taken the chair to a downstairs bathroom where a fuse box is located near the ceiling. And again, to go back to Tom's point there, if you are drunk and drugged up, that's going to be, again, you wouldn't probably have that clarity of thought to go and do that and to go and be able to replace a fuse. Some fuse boxes, I imagine, are hard enough to replace when you're sober. But another point about this is the chair that's placed for this individual to reach the fuse box. There's a crime scene photo of it. The chair's shorter than the toilet, so you could have just put the lid down on the toilet and stood on that. Again, but that might link up with someone drunk. I don't know. So for Morris to have been responsible for these horrible, horrible crimes, in less than a 20-minute period, he will have needed to have completed a 15-minute walk, stumbled upon the murder weapon, broken into the house, murdered Doris, picked up a TV, placed it on a bed, moved the chair to the downstairs bathroom, replaced a fuse, turned the lights back on, and then hidden before Mandy and the children got back. And I think the reason why the big point about the lights being back on is because they'd left the downstairs lights on when they left the house to go babysitting. So it looked like, so it looked like someone was in the house. So burglars and that scared off. My parents used to do that. Leave the house, leave the lights on to make it look like someone's inside.
Yeah.
Clever.
Yeah. Really clever.
That is clever.
But that is, if he's had to do all of that, including a 15-minute walk in a 20-minute period, whilst pissed up and drugged up.
It doesn't add up.
So again, in that situation, all of that would have needed to have been done by 11:48, because that's the time we know that Mandy and her children were dropped off by the taxi. So that's one part of the timeline we have down, a kind of concrete. So with all of that in mind, it also means that the person responsible for the 4 murders knew the house intimately, which is something that is argued Morris did not, although he would later claim that he'd been in the house, he'd been all around the downstairs and once been upstairs. It's also argued that Morris would not have been capable of doing all of this so quickly, so violently, and so methodically, whilst also drunk and high on amphetamine, which we've honed in on that quite a bit already. And the main thing here is, why would he have killed an elderly woman, a single mother, and 2 young children in such a violent and monstrous way? All because of an alleged sexual rejection.
And one thing to say about this case, it does get a little bit complicated and complex with basically who's shagging who. There's a lot of people who are having affairs, different relationships, and so some of that, we'll never be able to prove or say, but it is said that Morris did have a sexual relationship with Mandy. And we also mentioned the other relationships Mandy was having and affairs, which it does basically, again, not to keep relating it to Cluedo, but there's a lot of, or even like a Murder, She Wrote, there's lots of feasible reasons or links between people of why there possibly might be a motive. But even though we kind of said that some people don't believe Morris did have a relationship with Mandy, people do believe Morris himself did say he did.
This is the thing that really gets me with this case, is that all of the main theories, whether you believe Morris did it, whether you believe the other suspects did it, which we'll talk about, or anyone that held a relationship with Mandy did it, I still think if they had any resentment around jealousy, rejection, any of that type of thing, to do that to the children and the elderly mother as well. Not that you should even be able to do it to Mandy. I've not overlooked the idea of it being just opportunistic killer that was passing through the area, but then for that to have been possible, they needed to know the house, know the victims, know that other people were coming in and out, which that again probably isn't feasible. So it's a real difficult case to have a clear opinion of. I think it comes down to more, do you believe David did it or not? I think that's more the gist of it, but the fact that whoever did do it might still be out there and have been free for all these years is quite terrifying.
100%.
So number 9, Kelvin Road was now the home to one of Wales' most horrific and disturbing crime scenes in modern history. Both stories of the semi-detached property were now saturated in the blood of 2 women and 2 young girls. Their wounds were horrendous and their wounds were devastating. A maniac had been responsible for this devastation. The supposed murder weapon had been dropped to the floor whilst the killer, or killers in some people's eyes, then made an effort to greatly disturb the property, causing damage and mess throughout many different rooms, the landing and hallways of the house. But they weren't finished just yet. One of the first forensic scientists to arrive at the scene, a Mrs. Claire Galbraith, recalled the following on her initial observations.
It was a particularly chaotic and violent crime scene. We were trying to work out what had happened at the scene. Perhaps we could identify a weapon. Maybe we could get some information on who the offender might have been. When we got upstairs, I actually found a metal pole that was over 1 metre long and blood-stained. Later tests would show it was stained with the blood of Mandy and the 2 children. And the injuries were consistent to suggest that this pole was used to beat all 3 of them, and also Doris. The fact that no blood that could be identifiable to Doris was found on the pole may mean that she was killed first, and that any blood of hers on the pole was subsequently removed as the pole was used in other ways.
An official for the South Wales Police added,
"It is a horrific incident. There's somebody out there that must know who has done this dreadful act. There's no doubt that the person who's committed this crime was heavily bloodstained when they left the scene."
So yeah, I mean, this metal pole, Doris had injuries consistent with being struck by it, and so did the other 3 victims, but there was none of Doris's blood found on the pole. So the argument is, was there another, tool used for bludgeoning Doris that was taken away from the scene, or in the process of attacking the other 3 victims, was Doris's blood removed, which that's a complicated matter in itself. I mean, we saw a similar sort of thing with the analysis of blood spatter in the staircase episode, the Michael Peterson, and how there may have been a bludgeoning tool used in that attack. Yeah, this one's really tricky to figure out. But this, I mean, Claire Galbraith is a forensic scientist. She'll know much more than us. She's convinced that the blood from Doris was removed when the pole was then used in the other 3 attacks.
This particular theory lines up with another forensic scientist theory, in that Doris was murdered first with the metal pole while she slept in bed in one of the upstairs bedrooms. During this attack, the ceiling light was completely shattered, causing it to blow a fuse, which could have caused much of the power to go out inside the house, placing it in complete darkness. As we mentioned, Mandy Power and her daughters were all dropped off at 9 Kelvin Road by a taxi at 11:48 p.m. The prosecution claimed that Morris had arrived at the house 3 minutes prior to this, and was perhaps even waiting for them inside. While some, including forensic experts, have also speculated that, by this point, he had already broken into the house and murdered 80-year-old Doris before then hiding and waiting for them. Now you might be wondering, even if all this did somehow happen in a 3-minute window, or even if he had broken into the house but hadn't murdered Doris yet, what would have been Morris's motivation for these 4 completely brutal attacks? The prosecution theorised he had apparently randomly approached 34-year-old Mandy Powell for sex in recent days or weeks prior to the murders. When she rejected him, this apparently sealed her fate, as well as the fates of her 2 young daughters and ageing mother. This rejection, according to them, caused him to explode into a violent rage. This motive has been heavily argued, with many pointing out that the nature of the crimes and the other associated victims simply did not match the revenge for rejection theory. Other theories of motive pointing towards Morris, including fears that Mandy may have been about to expose criminal activities that he had been conducting, revenge for her calling his girlfriend a slapper, a serious, overwhelming feeling of jealousy and hatred towards her and her family, or that it was simply a drug and alcohol-fueled rage.
I think either way, though, any of those theories, the rejection one, her about to expose him, calling the girlfriend a slapper, jealousy, hatred, I still don't think that lines up with this crime, the nature of those murders.
No.
I saw it argued on Reddit that the fact that he had consumed amphetamine might have made him more violent and more prone to things like that, but many people were arguing that comment. I just don't feel like any of it does quite line up. And when we go on to talk about the other 2 people or other 3 people that are potential suspects, that one kind of lines up more for me, but still the nature of it doesn't make sense in either case.
Yeah, I just don't think motive, to me, doesn't make sense. I know there was mention of him having an argument with his girlfriend at the pub and stuff, and so maybe he left the pub angry. But still, it doesn't line up to me. I mean, I know obviously we've gone through his past, his violent past, using things like a pipe to commit offences. But yeah, we haven't gone into a really big part of the case yet, which I think that when you start knowing those and you think you're trying to make this make sense, it's a lot easier to make the other ones make sense. 12:45 a.m, roughly an hour after Mandy and her 2 children were dropped off by a taxi, a neighbour living in the house opposite them claims to have seen someone enter 9 Kelvin Road by themselves. Though she claimed that this person had no distinctly identifiable features, Rosemary Jones, the neighbour, recalled,
I heard a vehicle coming along Kelvin Road, and it sounded like a very heavy diesel engine. I heard it stop, and then the door slammed. Me being nosy, I got out of bed to have a look, and as my window was open, I could hear the front door of their house open. Then I saw the lights go on downstairs, and then upstairs in the house. And with that, I saw the shape of somebody's head. But that was it.
This neighbour couldn't identify either the vehicle or the person, but they claimed it was at the exact time of 12:45 a.m. There are no clear timeline indications for the next hour and 15 minutes. So there's a window of time, like I'd actually say it's like a misty window. Because people can't really see what they're... Do you know what I mean?
You're so creative.
Slaps.
You're such a creative spirit.
Thank you.
While we are in this hour and 15 minute window then, my keyboard has broken. Could you just Google, one of you, does amphetamine make you violent or more violent?
Symptoms include hallucinations, delusions, paranoia, bizarre and violent behaviour.
Oh, and is that exacerbated when you combine it with alcohol?
I'm sure it doesn't help.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it would, yeah. I can't confirm right now, but I'm sure it would.
Interesting.
But it's going to be the same way, isn't it? Different drugs and different alcohol affects people in different ways, isn't it? And
yeah. I mean, this is the thing. I'll say it while we're halfway through the episode. I don't think David Morris did this. I think it's more likely that the other people did this, but I still don't think the violent nature of these crimes line up with either party having done this. You know, I just don't see how anyone in the right mind could have done this to those children. That's the part that just doesn't make sense to me. And maybe the drug-induced rage is the only one that kind of is more believable, but then I don't think David did it. So
I think David was an easy target in this situation. Yes, he had a volatile background, but yeah, it doesn't add up to me at all.
Yeah, it's hard to obviously discuss it because we haven't revealed the other parts of the case yet. So, but I feel like, yeah, David was low-hanging fruit in this. He gave them an opportunity to jump on him and pin him down as the lead suspect. They saw an opportunity within him to move the attention away from other people. So we'll get onto it. But yeah. So believed to be between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m., a series of 4 fires were suddenly started inside 9 Kelvin Road after the murders. Again, it is not exactly clear how soon after the murders that these fires were started. Doris had numerous pieces of newspapers scrunched up and placed all around her, and the surrounding areas in her bedroom, with the killer attempting to set fire to her body. A second fire was started in Mandy's bedroom at a separate time, again using pieces of paper. In the downstairs living room, a small fire was started with a piece of cloth on a table, which held 2 photos of the girls. At 2:30 a.m, approximately 1 hour and 45 minutes after Mandy and her children were dropped off, some neighbours claimed that they first started to smell smoke on Kelvin Road, but they didn't think anything of it, and it was not overwhelming at this point. The fourth and the most destructive fire was started between 3:30 and 3:45 a.m. in the kitchen. It appears as though the fire starting was a last-minute decision by the perpetrator, as no fuel was brought into the property to aid in spreading of the fire. And so, the question still remains, was the fire setting done in order to get rid of evidence, or an attempt to further destroy the house and the victims? Or both?
4:30 a.m, 2 hours after neighbours first recalled smelling smoke and almost 5 hours after Mandy and her children first got home, the first call was made to emergency services. And yeah, this following call is a reenactment of those calls.
Hello, I don't know if it's been reported, but there's a house fire in Kelvin Road in Clydach.
There's a fire in the upstairs bedroom.
I've just noticed the smoke coming out of the neighbour's house.
Mr. Rob Vukovsky, who was another neighbour living opposite the house and who had also briefly been in a relationship with Mandy, recalled the following.
At 4:30, I heard a bang. I didn't think much of it, but it woke my young son up too. I looked across the road and there was smoke coming out from the back garden. I thought, right, I'll ring Mandy up. So I rang her mobile, no answer. I rang her house phone, no answer. So I went round the back of the house. I looked into the kitchen and it was completely ablaze. Another guy was with me. We kicked the door a few times and it gave way, but the heat and fire was overwhelming.
Fire services arrived soon after and immediately headed into the property. Rob Vukovsky and other neighbours were apparently screaming at them, "There are children upstairs." Ambulance crews also arrived shortly afterwards, but would pronounce all 4 people in the house, including the 2 young girls, as deceased. Everybody gathered at the scene was shocked to the core. People broke down crying, and others were too shocked for the news to even register. Initially, the neighbourhood believed all 4 victims had passed away in a house fire, but a post-mortem would immediately prove that they had passed away long before the fire. And yeah, I think some of the statements in this documentary I watched about firefighters and paramedics arriving at the scene immediately noticed, obviously, we've described the horrible and multiple wounds that each of these poor people suffered. And yeah, they could see straight away, this is not, death by fire. This is, they had been murdered prior to the fire being started.
I heard a shocking thing about the post-mortem. They x-rayed the bodies while still in the body bag.
Oh.
Which I think leans into how badly disfigured they were from the attacks, which is, truly horrific detail.
So to go back to the possibility that David Morris was responsible for these crimes, you might remember Mandy Jewell, his girlfriend, had left the pub that night at around 9 p.m. after the pair had an argument. Mandy would later state that Morris had come back home to the house they were living in sometime not long after midnight. And yeah, there's a possibility here that Mandy could be lying. She gave several different times. At one point she said he came home closer to 11, 10 p.m. Other times she said she didn't know what time he came home. But the main quote that she gave to police was that he came home sometime not long after midnight. Mandy Jewell recalled the following under oath.
I don't know what time he came home. It was sometime not long after midnight. I opened the door to him, the back door. He was wearing the clothes I'd bought him, the same clothes from the pub. He followed me into the hallway. I told him off for standing on my cream rug. He was wet with rain. He told me he had started to walk to his parents' house, but had turned back. I was asked if David had any injuries or scratches on his body or any blood on him. He didn't.
So yeah, with that part about him going to stay with his parents, it made sense. They'd had an argument. He didn't want to go home too early. He was going to walk to his parents, which happened to be in the same direction that Kelvin Road was. Again, depending on your stance on this case, that's a very good lie. Or, you know, unfortunately, it's placed him heading in the direction of the scene of the crime. But one thing that, again, she stated is that there was absolutely no blood. There was no blood found in her house or anything like that either. But to go back to the crime scene investigators, they were saying whoever did this would have had to have been covered in blood. And if you imagine the method in which those 4 lives were ended, you'd absolutely get residue and spatter. And yeah, David did not. But of course, Mandy could be lying. But again, no DNA, no forensic evidence was found in her home. On top of this, there was no DNA or fingerprint evidence at the scene that was matching Morris, no witnesses could place him at the scene, and no concrete motive or reason that he could have committed the murders was established. But that still didn't mean that he didn't do it, it just meant that he didn't do it beyond a reasonable doubt. So obviously this crime scene, there'd been multiple fires started in the house. It was a very, very terrifying scene as it was, very violent scene. One piece of evidence alongside the bloody white sock that was found was also a bloody handprint on the carpet of the living room floor. And it basically was in a position where it was next to a pile of VHS videos. It looked like someone had pretty much put their left palm down on the floor to then browse through their collection of VHS videos. There was some blood on the videos itself. The prosecution would argue it was a perfect match for David's handprint. The defense would say it's absolutely not. And there's a documentary I watched compares the prints. It looks nothing like David's hand. His is a lot smaller than this palm print. But again, there was no DNA, no fingerprints they could take from this to help them in their investigation. The sheer scale of violence stunned even the most seasoned officers of the South Wales Police. As forensic teams worked meticulously through the blood-stained and fire-damaged ash-filled crime scene, they sifted through charred remains for clues. Investigators launched what would become one of the largest and most complex murder inquiries in Welsh criminal history. They had no clear suspect, no eyewitnesses, no DNA, no real physical evidence, no sign of a break-in, and no idea how somebody could have done this to 3 generations of a family, including 2 young children and a vulnerable old woman. Links to Mandy Power immediately became a key focal point in the search for their suspect, or potential suspects. So the wider Clydach community, which was a typically peaceful and close-knit former mining village, was paralysed with grief and fear. They simply could not comprehend how or why anybody could possibly have done this to anyone. Candlelit vigils were held, floral tributes were piled up outside the now cordoned-off family home, and disbelief swept through the neighbourhood. That such horrific violence could happen in their midst, and to such a well-liked woman and her family, shattered any sense of safety that the villagers once had. The funerals of the 4 victims were attended by more than 1,000 people, bringing with it a large police presence, with mourners lining the streets in silence as 4 white coffins were carried into the local church. The local clergy spoke of evil visiting the village, while others described the atmosphere as that of a collective mourning mixed with a growing anxiety that the killer or killers were still very much at large and were possibly even standing amongst them. Yeah, Clydach couldn't get the interesting stuff in early on, but a common name for rivers or streams in South Wales. Clydach means sheltered, strong, swift, or stony.
Ben Carter's facts.
I love how you didn't say interesting.
Yeah.
Ben Carter's words. Here's a question: Is it disrespectful to wear a party hat when talking about kids getting murdered?
It's my birthday.
Okay, that's fine.
You keep that in.
I mean, if I was wearing the sunglasses, maybe. Despite a high-profile investigation, with over 1,500 witness statements taken and more than 30,000 documents compiled, no arrests were made for the following 2 years. Between 50 and 60 police officers worked all hours of the day to try and uncover new leads or clues relating to the murders. Detectives pursued various leads, including the possibility of a sexual motive, personal vendettas, organised crime, and even the internal police connections, as it was eventually revealed that Mandy had been romantically involved with a serving officer. More on this shortly. The case remained unsolved during that time, with some believing it is still unsolved to date. Local police continue to appeal to the public, investigate multiple lines, including local individuals, wherein they continue to build up a large body of witness statements. During this period, rumours and local suspicions start to swirl, but the lack of any concrete forensic evidence tying any individual to the scene, combined with the apparent randomness and brutality of the murders, left investigators without a clear suspect. The absence of progress only deepened public unease, and for years the question haunted the village of Clydach. Who could have done this, and why?
Who could have done this and why?
Why?
Who could have done this and why?
Who could have done this and why?
Why?
Tell them that it's human nature. Not this case, though.
July of 2000. After a year without progress, it appeared initially as though there was finally a breakthrough in the case when it was announced that 3 people were suddenly arrested in connection with the Clydach murders. The general public was stunned to learn that Alison Lewis, her husband Stephen Lewis, and his twin brother Stuart Lewis had all been arrested, and that Alison was a former police constable, Stephen was a serving police sergeant, and Stuart was an acting inspector in the Swansea area. Alison and Stephen, a married couple, were arrested on suspicion of murder, whilst the brother Stuart was arrested on suspicion of perverting the course of justice. This led to the, at the time, bombshell revelation that Alison Lewis was in a secret relationship with Mandy Power, and that the pair had, at least according to an article published by The Standard, held a full-scale secret lesbian relationship for 7 months prior to the murders, after Mandy and Alison were introduced to one another by a mutual friend at a tarot card reading at Mandy's home.
Tarot cards, mate.
Everywhere.
Tarot cards are coming up a lot. Yeah. Recent cases, you know. But yeah, this is a big moment in the case now. Well, a huge moment in the case. And this is where a lot of people believe the true perpetrators are now apprehended. But yeah, we'll get into this.
The relationship was completely secret and kept private, with many sources indicating that Alison's husband, Stephen, did not know about the relationship until the day after the murders, and Mandy's family stating that they were not aware that she was bisexual. It was also speculated that Alison and Mandy were so infatuated with one another that they were actually in the process of trying to start a new life together. The theory is now put forward that the husband and wife committed the murders after learning of the secret affair, and that Stuart, Stephen's brother, was also involved in covering it up. This new theory potentially accounted for the intimate knowledge of the layout of the house, as well as the sexual assault with a vibrator that the pair once shared together. It would also be emphasised that Alison was a Welsh international rugby player and a karate black belt, capable of handling herself. Despite this, the Lewis trio was released on bail, and though they had been questioned over a period of several days, no charges were brought forward due to insufficient evidence and the fact that they had alibis. The alibis for Alison and Stephen were that they were asleep in bed with one another at the time. So yeah, convenient.
How convenient.
According to prosecutor Patrick Harrington,
the 3 police officers were subjected to intense scrutiny, which involved lengthy questioning and searches of their homes, cars, and clothes. Their alibis were checked. It became clear that during the time of the killings, Alison and her husband were at their home together. The suspicions were unfounded. It is always a matter of profound regret when the finger of suspicion is pointed at somebody wrongly.
So yeah, this is interesting. Obviously their alibi is that they were home together. This is at a time before obviously everyone had smartphones, GPS in them and things like that. But they basically said, No, we were asleep. Neither of us left the house. We both saw each other sleeping, that type of thing. But for the Alison side of things, for her involvement, she immediately became public enemy number one and was blamed for this happening by a great portion of the local public. There was an apparent suicide attempt from Alison jumping out of a window of a high building. She's later in life done a lot of interviews in which she does seem to be legitimately devastated. Again, people are saying that this is just her playing up to the cameras. She did a particular interview a couple of years ago with Sky News, which was basically her talking along the lines of her becoming the devil in most people's eyes. I think the police also went as far as tapping their phones. They claimed to have tapped these individuals' phones. But the main question here was, if David didn't do it and these people did, which is, I would say, probably the common belief, did they still have it in them? Let's say Stephen found out about the affair and that was what triggered this. Did they still have it in them to brutally murder 2 young children and an elderly woman who was laying in bed defenseless? From this moment onwards, additional scrutiny was placed on Stephen and Alison Lewis when one of Mandy Power's neighbours informed police that she had overheard Stephen threatening the life of Mandy. So this is a huge, huge moment. The neighbour claimed to have heard Stephen shouting, "Stay away from my wife or I'll kill you." So that's kind of incriminating. This would imply that Stephen did in fact know about the affair prior to the murders, not the day after the murders like he claims, and that he knew where Mandy lived, and that he had publicly threatened her life very close to the time that she and her family were brutally murdered. In response to this accusation, Stephen claimed it was a joke and that he didn't know the affair was actually taking place. So he was sarcastically saying, stay away from my wife or I'll kill you. It's a weak defense, a weak response.
Good joke.
Yeah. And perhaps unsurprisingly, Stephen and Alison would file for divorce soon after this.
And again, another little twist in this with, like I was saying, it's kind of a bit like it's been written with all the kind of twists and turns. Stephen's twin brother, Acting Inspector Stuart Lewis, was on patrol on the night of the murders, and he was actually one of the first senior officers to arrive at 9 Kelvin Road after the alarm was raised. After the fire was eventually put out and the reality set in that 4 murders had occurred, Stuart apparently only stayed at the property for a further 8 minutes before leaving the scene completely. Now, this is wild. So he was an acting inspector, as we said, and he would be the person to be called in for these kind of things. But what police officer is going to a scene of, possible, it could be death by fire, it could be death by arson, or, as we know now, death by murder, being there for 8 minutes before thinking, oh, that's long enough, I can leave now. Mm-hmm. He didn't make any effort to preserve the scene. He didn't provide direction for others to preserve the scene, and he didn't report the scene as suspicious. As well as this, his logbook for that night suddenly went missing, and he didn't fill in his pocketbook until 2 days later on Monday. He would also not give any evidence in court at future trials. Some of the reasoning he gave for leaving was he said he believed it was death by fire, and he would use that as a reason as to why, not having to preserve the scene, but I would still argue that, it could have been arson, so you still need to preserve it. It's still a scene where 4 people lost their lives, so...
He's also worked that out in 8 minutes is mad.
Yeah, and the fact that he's basically, he's left there and he's not instructed other people to go to the scene. He's leaving it completely open to people to, in theory, tamper with things, move things around, clean things up or whatever, is truly baffling to me. And if that's not, red flags to people just to think what's going on here, and then, because even you alone, you look at that by itself and you're like, that is wild. But then you zoom out and you go, oh, and the link that his brother's wife was having an affair with the woman in the house. I mean, that is so much motive and so much, it is truly bizarre. And also going back to the taxi driver who claimed to see 2 men in Clydach during the early hours, guess which 2 men he thinks he saw? Stephen and Stuart Lewis. Mike Pugh, the taxi driver, claimed,
there were 2 blokes walking towards me on the pavement next to the taxi. What struck me is that they were very, very similar. Both dark hair, both sort of cropped haircuts, both very, very similar features. They were right by the property between 2 and 2:30 in the morning. I contacted the police and offered to give my statement. They said they would call me back. But they never did.
And you can also imagine in this instance, if Stephen was the person who committed this crime, he went into the house, fit of rage, he feels embarrassed, he's been cheated on in the affair, he kills his family. He would know that his brother's on, he'll be the first person at the crime scene.
Yeah.
And he will know that, he can call his brother and maybe let him know. And, the police at this time in Wales also didn't have the best reputations, let's say.
That's true.
So it's not too far-fetched to think he's called his brother after what's happened and he said, I need your help. And his brother, assisting along with this. There's also some strange behaviours by Stuart as well. When he goes back to the police precinct, he's using the payphone rather than his office phone to make some phone calls, which is very bizarre. He's an officer which would have his own phone. Just some very strange behaviours. And now the fact that Mike Pugh, the taxi driver, has identified these two as well as being around the scene, there's a lot going on here.
The part that really confuses me in all of this is the fire element, because as well, if this was, as we say, if we go, let's say Stephen and Stuart planned this in advance, I still think whoever did this and however they did this, the fire thing was a last minute decision, because if they'd planned this properly, they would have brought fuel and properly doused the house and set it ablaze. It seems like scrunched a few newspapers up, put it around some of the bodies, tried to light a fire on a tablecloth in the living room. It just seems like a last minute, let's do this as well, which that part kind of froze me.
I don't, and this is just, I have the feeling that Stephen, he did this and then his brother wasn't aware of it until he was made aware of it. I don't think it's pre-planned from both of them. I think Stuart was just trying to probably cover up for his brother and assist him in terms of it. And I think the fire,
like a house fire.
Yeah, I think the fire was an afterthought. I also think was the plan. It was just to kill Mandy, and the fact that other people were in the house was, I have to get rid of any evidence and anyone that saw me or witnessed this. I don't think it was a case of I'm going to kill all of them and that's it. I think it's kind of very clumsily done and not thought out. That's the whole point with this, is none of it was thought out, and the fire was an afterthought, and that could even be Stuart could, again, this is me just purely riffing here, not saying anything else, but Stuart could have perhaps said to Stephen, you need to burn the place and try and get rid of the evidence. The one thing to say, it's not a crazy thought to think the fact that the lack of DNA in the house, you have to be someone who understands how forensics work and how DNA is left. And it's also the fact that the scene was pretty much cleaned with the right kind of bleach, which actually does get rid of DNA, because standard kinds of bleaches don't. I think it's one that has some form of oxygen in the title. I can't remember exactly what it is, but the right kind of bleach was used to clean the scene. The sock being used to hold the poles. I mean, the scene was cleaned so well that even David Morris's DNA, which would have been in the house if he'd been there, for sexual relations, wasn't in the house at all. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they cleaned it so well in that instance, again, which I just think David Morris is not going around there with bleach, cleaning it all up and doing all that, especially whilst being drunk and doing such a good job of it whilst drunk and intoxicated. So as well as Mike Pugh, the taxi driver, witnessing, there was another witness by the name of Nicola Williams, who also testified in court that she saw a man matching Stephen Lewis's description walking around the corner from Kelvin Road between 2:15 and 2:30 a.m. on the night of the murders, carrying some form of large parcel or kit bag. She provided a detailed description which resulted in an e-fit being created, but it was never released to the public. And can you guess who the e-fit looked exactly like?
I mean, it's spot on.
Yes, we're showing it to you guys now. Even the little bit of the fringe that comes down is, yes. So that is wild.
Yeah, exactly like Stephen Lewis, and not too far away from Stuart Lewis either, with them being twins. It's terrifying.
Another witness, Mr. John Allen, came forward with the same statement years later, but was afraid to contact police due to his own criminal record.
Yeah, so he was driving around late at night in the area, and he was driving with a suspended license at the time, so he didn't want to come forward and basically say, I saw these guys. But as soon as he saw this, basically this e-fit that was drawn up was not released to the public, and so eventually someone got hold of it and started putting posters up around Clydach with it, and he saw that and was immediately like, okay, I know who I've seen now. But yes, it is crazy, isn't it? Absolutely crazy. I mean, Dan, you didn't know, I know we've very much given our opinions here on, we are leaning more towards the Lewis family, but what are your thoughts so far on this, coming in kind of new to this?
Yeah, I'm completely with you. This all lines up now. And like I said before, it's It's actually quite scary that somebody can be, forgetting their violent history aside, can be, I think you mentioned at the start, tunnel visioned into this. Yeah, it's him, it's definitely him. We'll make it work, we'll add all the connections, we'll do that. But it's clear what's happening here.
Tom mentioned the South Wales police didn't have the best reputation at the time. We'll explain why that was in a minute, but basically they've been kind of with one of their own or three of their own being arrested. It was a big blemish on their reputation at the time, and so they're needing answers quickly now that they've released Stephen, Stuart and Alison. They need answers very, very quickly now.
At risk of further embarrassment, the South Wales police now needed answers, and they needed answers quickly. The Lewis family members had now been officially ruled out as suspects by the Crown Prosecution Service, and so the police investigation started to focus elsewhere. Quickly, news came to light of a new and crucial piece of evidence that had suddenly emerged in the Clydach murders case, and the police's attention rapidly focused on a 40-year-old local man by the name of David Dye Morris. A blood-stained and broken gold chain, apparently discovered at the crime scene, was soon identified as resembling one that Morris was known to wear. A note to consider is that the gold chain was found underneath electric wires in Doris's bedroom, which implied it had been there for some time and had not fallen on the floor during a scuffle, as was suggested. When questioned about this, Morris denied ever owning such a chain, only for multiple witnesses, including his own daughter, to contradict him. His story kept changing about numerous different things. Morris denied ever owning the broken gold chain found at the crime scene, an item police believed was dropped or ripped from his neck during the savage attack. He later claimed that he had asked a friend to get him a replica version of the chain, which was different. Either way, this was a crucial moment, and enough to take Morris in for questioning. He maintained that the chain had been planted there, and he was completely innocent whilst being interrogated.
So we'll play some clips of this interrogation for you now. And I mean, even in the middle of this interrogation, he gets caught in a lie, which doesn't help him. He claims that he had only been in the downstairs part of the house and had been there and been in multiple, the toilet downstairs, the living room downstairs, kitchen downstairs. He then kind of puts his head in his hands and says, I've been upstairs. I've been upstairs with Mandy for sex. We had sex. And he then gets caught in a lie. And it doesn't sound great, but at the same time, when he's then saying, why would I have done this to those children? Why would I have done that? You do hear the genuine emotion there, which, again, I mean, I'm viewing this very much as he's an innocent man. I do appreciate there are people out there that don't believe that, but I just think, certainly beyond reasonable doubt, they have not got enough here on him, and that chain could have been planted there, could have come off when if he was there with Mandy. I don't know.
South Wales police are questioning a man about the murder of 3 generations of the same family. The death...
You were arrested this morning at 7:20 a.m, am I right? Yes. This interview is for you to give an explanation, an account of anything you know about the murders of Doris Violet Dawson, Amanda Jane Power, Katie Jane Power and Emily Jane Power. When have you been in the house, Dave?
All downstairs. Toilet. And upstairs with Mandy once.
Okay, tell me about that occasion then. You've been upstairs with Mandy once, but that hasn't been revealed in your statements before. No. You said before, didn't you, that you've never been upstairs in the house?
We had sex.
Okay, so that's a new revelation to us now.
Did you leave that chain at Mandy's house? No. On Saturday night?
No.
You sure?
I'm positive. I had no reason to hurt Mandy or the children. I got no possible reason whatsoever. Why bloody hell would I do it?
Forensic experts also suddenly found multiple microscopic paint chips on the chain alongside the blood, which matched a cabinet that was found in Morris's flat. Already known to local police for his vast history of violent outbursts and domestic abuse, Morris's background made him a highly compelling suspect in the Clydach murders. As we explained earlier, on the night of the murders, he had been drinking in local pubs and was apparently last seen walking in the direction of Kelvin Road. What happened after that remains a matter of fierce debate, but for South Wales police, the trail was convincing enough. Yeah, do you think in the interrogation he's kind of like, he's panic lying? Because, you know, if you haven't done it, why would you lie? But is he kind of scared of other things coming out and he's kind of catching himself in these lies?
That's what it seems like. It seems like if he had legitimately had a relationship with Mandy, even a brief one, it seems like he didn't want to talk about that because he knew that would incriminate him further.
Yeah.
But then he has to talk about it to explain how the necklace got there, realizes how bad that looks, and then he's a man with a very shady background. He's done some awful things in his life. But I mean, I just don't think there's enough there to prove that he did this. And also in hearing him during that interrogation, I mean, he doesn't have a lawyer with him or anything. He's openly talking with them. You can see he's realizing he's saying too much, but also needs to say certain parts of it to prove other parts. So it's just, it's a difficult situation. Very difficult.
Yeah, and he'll have experience before being arrested and being questioned and going through this whole process before. So he's probably running through his mind of how it's gone wrong in the past, and maybe he felt before he should have spoke before when he didn't, and maybe, you know, so he's probably going a million miles in his head, and he has to speak it out essentially. But being found out lying, and that doesn't help his case really.
In March of 2001, nearly 2 years after the killings, David Morris was arrested for the murders of Mandy Power, her daughters Katie and Emily, and her elderly mother, Doris Dawson. This was despite there being no DNA, fingerprint, or forensic evidence belonging to Morris at the scene, and no eyewitnesses being able to place him there. As we said, there were at least 3 different eyewitnesses that could place Stephen and Stuart Lewis there. No one could place Morris there. Despite this, David Morris was subsequently charged with 4 counts of murder, and preparations began for what would become one of the most high-profile and controversial trials in Welsh legal history. And it was then gradually revealed through this interrogation that Morris claimed he was there in the house on the Friday morning. The pair had sex together, during which time his chain could have come off. However, he stated the chain would have come off in the kitchen. It was found in Doris's bedroom, which is where police suggesting it came off during the attack, where the light bulb was smashed. So as well as obviously Morris's recollection of the pair having sex on the Friday morning before the night of Saturday and early hours of Sunday was when the murders occurred, it was speculated that Alison's DNA was also found on the vibrator that was placed and left in Mandy when she was murdered. So there was allegations that Alison Lewis's DNA was there, but David Morris's DNA was not there. So David Morris's first trial started in April of 2002 at Swansea Crown Court. The prosecution presented a distressing account of a man, quote, consumed by anger, jealousy and violence after supposedly being spurned by Mandy Power on the night of the murders. A key piece of evidence was the broken gold chain discovered at the crime scene, which Morris had initially claimed he did not own, even though several witnesses testified that he often wore it above his t-shirts. Forensic analysis also connected tiny paint chips on the chain to kitchen cabinets that were kept in Morris's apartment. The prosecution contended that, after drinking heavily that evening and taking drugs, Morris assaulted Mandy Power and then killed her elderly mother and 2 young daughters to remove any witnesses. So they're going with the theory that Doris was actually killed last, where obviously forensic scientists would come forward and say it's much more likely Doris was killed first. The defense argued that the case relied on circumstantial evidence and highlighted the absence of any direct forensic proof. So no DNA, no forensic evidence, no fingerprints, no eyewitnesses. Despite this, after 11 weeks of distressing testimony and intense media attention, the jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict. The victims' families and much of the community believed that Morris was responsible. And whilst Morris would argue his innocence for the rest of his life, he was found guilty of all 4 murders and received a life sentence, but the controversy surrounding the case was only just beginning. During the trial, Mandy Jewell, Morris's girlfriend, was asked about their relationship and if it ever became violent. She answered that question as follows.
We had a stable relationship, but there was violence. David was violent to me, and I was violent to him. With us, it was best friends or all-out war. He had punched me more than once, but not violently. He punched me on the arm and the leg, and kicked me on the backside.
Another defence witness, and this was next-door neighbour Louise Pugh, stormed out of the court while swearing at the prosecution barrister after they suggested she had made up some of her evidence. Louise Pugh, who lived next door to Mandy Power in Clydach when the murders occurred, told the court that she had seen Inspector Stephen Lewis threaten to kill Mandy Power a week before the murders if she did not stay away from his wife, Alison. The court was adjourned for a while until Miss Pugh returned to complete her evidence, and in reacting to the life sentence given to her brother, Deborah Thomas, Morris's sister, would state the following.
It's obvious, it's all there in front of you. Just because he had a criminal past, it was an easy target, and he became a quick and easy target.
Which is, that's what you said earlier, Dan.
It's literally word for word is what I said to say.
Samesies.
You're welcome.
Whilst Morris's daughter, Janine Morris, would state the following.
Well, obviously, I love my dad, but it's not of the blind faith because he's my dad. There's never been any part of my mind that's ever wavered from knowing that he's innocent, and the evidence, it just isn't possible.
In 2005, 3 years after his conviction, the Court of Appeal overturned David Morris's guilty verdict. This was not because of new forensic evidence or proof of his innocence, but due to a major legal technicality. It was revealed that Morris's original defence lawyer had a conflict of interest, having previously represented important prosecution witnesses, which seriously compromised the trial's fairness. Consequently, a retrial was ordered, and in 2006, Morris faced the jury again, this time at Newport Crown Court. By this point, he had already spent 4 years of his life behind bars. The second trial examined much of the same evidence, the broken gold chain, paint fragments, and Morris's inconsistent statements. The prosecution strengthened their argument that Morris had erupted in a violent rage after being sexually rejected by Mandy Power, while the defence argued the case was still circumstantial and filled with unanswered questions. After a tense and closely monitored trial, the jury once again delivered a guilty verdict, and Morris received a life sentence with a minimum of 32 years, a ruling that continued to split public opinion and fuel ongoing claims of a miscarriage of justice. The other thing to mention in that is the bloody EFIT wasn't used in evidence in that trial.
Crazy.
When it's literally the spitting image, that to me is absolutely baffling.
The thing is, I don't think you have anything for either. I mean, at the moment, we're basically narrowing it down to David Morris or Stephen Lewis and co. And I don't think either of those two parties you have enough beyond a reasonable doubt to convict.
I think you have so much more motive.
But you have so much more motive, Stephen Lewis and co.
Murder.
Threatening, you have eyewitnesses that can place them there, multiple eyewitnesses that can place them there.
So after a second conviction in 2006, David Morris started a life sentence with a minimum term of 32 years, held in some of the toughest prisons in the UK, including HMP Long Lartin. Throughout his time in prison, Morris insisted he was completely innocent, always denying any role in the brutal murders of Mandy Power, her daughters Katie and Emily, and her mother Doris Dawson. As time went on, public interest in the case grew stronger. More and more people, including activists, journalists, legal professionals, and even former police officers, began to doubt the validity of Morris's conviction. Protests and petitions were organised, documentaries presented new theories, and investigative reporters found inconsistencies in the original investigation. Multiple appeals and requests for review were made to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, but none was successful in reversing his conviction. Supporters highlighted other possible suspects, mishandled evidence, and alleged police misconduct. Despite decades of efforts to prove his innocence, David Morris passed away in prison on August 20th, 2021, at the age of 59, never admitting any guilt. His death left the grieving family still asserting his innocence, as well as a troubling case that continues to raise doubts about whether the true killer has escaped justice. At the time of his death, a Facebook group, Justice for David Morris, run by family and friends on social media, had more than 20,000 followers, whilst there were numerous Change.org petitions to reopen the case. Now, you might still be asking, why would people feel so strongly that multiple police forces were involved in the cover-up? How would this be possible? Well, the murder of Lynette White, which occurred in Cardiff in 1988, along with the shocking miscarriage of justice that followed, had become a significant point of reference in Welsh legal history, still to this day overshadowing other controversial cases like that of David Morris. In Lynette's case, 5 innocent men were arrested, and 3 were wrongly convicted due to coerced confessions, poor police tactics, and a desperate need for conviction. The subsequent trial was the largest police corruption trial in British criminal history. It wasn't until 2003, 15 years later, that DNA evidence identified the real killer, Geoffrey Gaffor, leading to the full exoneration of the so-called Cardiff Three. For many, the similarities between the two cases are too obvious to overlook. A high-profile, brutal murder, immense public pressure to resolve it, and a police force facing scrutiny for its methods. The Lynette White scandal demonstrated that South Wales police could make catastrophic investigative errors, which has intensified with the suspicion that David Norris may have been wrongfully convicted in the Clydach murders. To this day, campaigners connect the two cases, arguing that if one miscarriage of justice could occur, another could as well.
So there you have it, guys. That was, at long last, the Clydach murders. Thoughts? Where are we standing on all of this? I think it's quite clear we've been very biased the whole way through the episode, but I think there's reason behind it.
I just think it's an incredibly sad story. The fact that it was a quadruple homicide, the fact that likely somebody was wrongly convicted, and the fact that likely somebody got away with it. It's just awful on all fronts. But I'm with you, BC. I don't believe DM did it, David Norris. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I think the terrifying thing is, I don't think I would go as far as to say I think the whole police were like, no, one of their own did it, therefore they covered it up. But I do think they were quick to try and find an alternative who could fit the mould to get any attention away from themselves. And I personally think that, fit of rage, jealousy, goes to the house, hopes to just find Mandy by herself, maybe doesn't know the context of who else is in the house, then feels the need to have to completely kill everyone within that house to have no, witnesses there, calls his brother, panicked, and his brother, assists him as best he could. And then I think, from there, I don't think Alison had anything to do with it. But I also think, maybe Alison, for whatever reason, didn't want things to emerge or come out. But it's a truly, or Alison probably wanted to believe that it was David Norris, rather than thinking it was her husband. But that's where I stand, yeah.
It's just the pure violent nature of it all. Like, police back then in the UK, were they armed? Mind you might not wanted to have left bullets behind or anything like that, anything traceable, but just the metal pipe, 2 little children. They are, as I said, collateral for Mandy Power. And that's it. That is if there's still a possibility that it wasn't David and it wasn't any of the Lewis family either. It's a limited possibility, obviously, but I think, I can't get my head around the violence of it, the absolute rage of it all, which then led me, as I said, I thought maybe the drugs were a factor. But I think there's much more on the scales of Stephen Lewis's rage. But I still think no matter how angry either of them were, either side, David Norris or any of the Lewis family, there's no, it doesn't match the nature of those crimes. It's just...
Well, it's a crime of passion if you think it's and, that we've done multiple cases where people seemingly think there's no other way out than, killing everyone within that establishment, which is, and I
think of the Chris Watts case all of a sudden just came to mind. And that was just like that, It's obviously a very different case, but ultimately, I think probably if I had to pick, I would say David Norris was innocent. I'd say there was no clear DNA evidence, scientific proof that shows he committed it, certainly beyond a reasonable doubt.
I just think there's no way that David Norris is not leaving any DNA or knowing how to act, effectively, clean the crime scene. And I think if it was anything to do with drugs, there'd be a lot more cases of drug-fueled anger and killing people.
Yeah.
Which, I think that's where we stand. We'd love to hear what you guys think. Or have we even maybe overlooked as someone else, a potential person that we haven't covered? Do let us know. We're always eager to hear what you guys think. And a big thank you to the audience for picking this case. Yeah, very fascinating. One can see why I guess wanted us to cover it.
The other thing is, obviously Google Street View has helped me every week with these cases. The house is still standing to date. So you can go on I'll pop that in our Facebook group. You can go and have a look at the house, but I can't tell if it's occupied or not. It looks occupied. The houses around it definitely are occupied. There's a car parked outside the house that suggests it's occupied, but it's still very much standing, and it looks like it's been refurbished, obviously, since the fires. You're always intrigued by murder houses, Tommy. Perhaps the house next door to it is for sale, actually, at the time of the Street View.
Yeah, Street View is not in live camera.
But I had one lookalike, David Morris, Di Morris, friend of the show, friend of Dan, Lee from The Office. It's a stretch. It is a stretch.
Please put the photos in.
Sorry, Joel.
Okay.
Joel Beckett is the real name.
Joel Beckett, yeah. I'm not sure he's going to be too happy about that.
Sorry. But for those that don't know, he did the warning note for like our first 3 or 4 series.
He did, yeah.
Lee from The Office. Joel, what a lad.
Yeah, I'm
sorry about the look.
I saw him in Band of Brothers the other day when I was watching it.
Yeah.
Oh.
And yes, guys, that is it. That is the end of Series 12. And what a journey we have been on. And if anyone is new to the...
Sorry.
That's all right. It's Dan's birthday, guys.
It's my birthday.
No.
Sorry to interrupt, Dom. I just want to say thanks for all the birthday messages. I can see at least 3 in the comment section below. So keep them coming in.
Nice, man. Yeah. That's sick, man.
Wow.
This feels a very Carter move.
Continue, Tom. Sorry.
Carter move.
Oh. It's beneath me.
Whoa.
Making it about... But thank you so much for supporting us this series. We really do appreciate it, and we could not do it without you. I want to shout out to the whole crew, the IGMAP crew. You got Ben Bonsey on the edits. You got Ben Aitken on the lovely thumbnails and the graphic design. You've got Sam J. Lance with all the lovely promo videos we've done and work and photography we've done with him. And of course, a shout out to Ben Carter for all the lovely writing and research this series. Producer Dan for producing away. It's been a big one, and we're going to come back even bigger and stronger for Series 13.
Yeah, spooky number, isn't it? It's got to be some spooky cases for that series.
Sure.
13 series. Wow. Crazy, isn't it?
Not 12, but...
Yeah, but by the time the 13th, we will be doing some stuff. If you're new to us, thank you so much. Please consider clicking that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube or following us on the various podcast platforms. We will be doing some Halloween and Christmas specials for you here on the main channel. But if you can't wait until Series 13, which will be a little while away yet, why not head over to icmap.co.uk. It's our website. We do bonus episodes every single week there, including during our breaks between series. So you're going to go and get, a whole bunch of new episodes, and weekly content will not stop until we're back with Series 13. So why not consider becoming a cult member? Less than the price of a cup of coffee, and you can get it free for a fucking week, which is hurting us financially, but Dan doesn't seem to care.
Sorry about that, boys.
Birthday mode.
Let me just quickly say a big well done to you two, Ben and Tom. You boys have smashed it again, yet again. It's a big feat doing these things, but we made it. And then just a wonderful little thank you to all our subscribers, our listeners, our followers, people who share stuff, like stuff, comment on stuff. It really doesn't ever go unnoticed. We feel so lucky to be in this position. We feel that we're growing every day. We're getting better every day. We just feel really good about it. So thank you if you've ever done anything for the podcast. It really means a lot.
Yeah, literally just telling a friend. The amount of times that we've heard, we recommended by a friend and then listening. It does genuinely help more than you ever know. So thank you once again. And for the final time of Series 12, like we always say,
we say this all the time.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Well, unless it's... Oh, God.
Wearing a party hat talking about true crime?
It's my birthday.
Didn't take it off once.
It's my birthday.
I'll do what I want to.
Do what I want.
Unless it's doing that. Yep. Love you guys.
I love you more.
Horrible. There's horrible weird noises, by the way. It is a dog being cute.
It is, yeah.
We're going to get comments about that.
Like Ben's just making little noises with his mouth. Yeah. Ben. Till next time, guys. Take care of yourself.
Bye-bye.
See you soon.